What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. So today's episode is going to be a little different. It's just me on the mic giving my kind of race recap for the Houston Marathon I ran a couple weeks ago. 2:59:38 was the time, but I'm at a high level going to share my lessons learned from what has been called the longest marathon build of all time. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, just over the last 10 months, I guess kind of sharing what I've learned about myself and how I've grown and some of the lessons learned throughout the process, and then get into a bit of a race recap of the actual race itself, and then some of the lessons learned specifically from the race. Before I jump in, though, I got to say hi to my YouTube friends. I know I've been a little MIA on the YouTube side of things, and I'll get into that a little bit more as we get into this, but I'm doing things a little different and going with a video podcast that I'm also going to put on my channel. So saying hi to my YouTube friends. I'm in a very scenic background of my bedroom. You have the breaker over there and just absolutely aesthetically pleasing background for a video podcast. But nonetheless, let's jump right in. So I want to start off and go back to February 3rd, 2024. Where I'm at my apartment, I'm sitting at my desk, working on a Saturday, and in the background I have a replay of the Olympic marathon trials that had transpired a little bit earlier in that morning. And this is coming at a time where I literally had just taken a new job. I'd put in my 2 weeks notice in my old job and was about to, start a new job where my total hours worked each week would be significantly decreased and really starting a new chapter of life in some sense. And I was in a time of transition, and I remember watching the marathon trials and just being so inspired to see athletes in this new sport that I've come to get myself into, which is running the marathon, and seeing athletes at the highest level here in the US compete, seeing Zach Panning go out and be bold and just putting it all on the line, right? Seeing Dakota Lindworm, I think it's Dakota Pippin now. Apologies if I butchered her last name. I think she got recently married, but seeing Dakota hit one of those three spots, see Fiona O'Keefe in her marathon debut absolutely crush it, right? And then see so many other amateur athletes that had done so much work just to get to that race and to see them compete. And it was a really cool and inspiring thing to watch. And I left that day with a sense of inspiration. I'm like, man, what if I start taking my running more seriously? And what if I really start pushing to see what I'm capable of? So fast forward to about a month later, I'm on the phone with my coach, Adam Waldham, and we come to the conclusion of we're going to set a goal for sub 2:55 to run the Houston Marathon 10 months later. And where I really came up with that goal was, I'd seen Nick Bare, and I was like, what is somebody that ran kind of around 3:25? I went 3:24 high something for my first marathon. I was like, what is someone who's gone from 3:25? What's the biggest jump they've done in 1 year of training? Or not specifically within 1 year, that was kind of within my context, but what is the biggest jump I could find of somebody who ran 3:24? Where was the highest mark they ran the marathon in the next one, or dropped the time there most, or the biggest PR? And look, I'm sure there's absolutely somebody else that's been out there and done, dropped a bigger PR. But the only thing I could really find was Nick Bare, who went 3:25 on his third marathon. And then I think it was his third, but the next one he did, it was 2:56. And I'm like, that's the standard. That's what I have to go after. And so we set the goal and got after it. So that's the origin story on the original goal of 2:55, which became a goal of sub 2:50. But my lessons learned from this training block. The first one, the absolute power of consistency. I just mentioned Nick Bare. He constantly harps on, it's better to be consistently good than occasionally great. And that's true in every area of life, but with your fitness in particular, there's no way around it. You have to be consistent if you want to do incredible and big things. And so I did some I guess back of the envelope kind of math here. So I run typically 6 days a week. Just assume 10 months of training. We're looking at roughly 240 runs in the build for Houston. Of those 240 runs, and again, that's just an approximate, the week of October 28th, I missed 4 runs unexpectedly due to injury that we just had to take some time off from that. And my coach was really key in just telling me to, hey, relax, like don't push through it. We're just going to take some time off, and in a week, we'll get back to normal. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. So missed 4 unexpected rest days there. The weekend of one of my best friend's wedding, I think it was like the weekend of like June 14th, 15th, kind of in that time frame. I think I had 4 miles easy on that Friday, June 14th, and 4 miles easy on June 15th. I didn't do either one of those. The first day, I just wanted to make it about my friend and like didn't want to have to worry about like squeezing in a run super early. That weekend was about him and not about me and my running. So I just like, I'm not going to do it. The next day I felt like crap, as you can imagine, having a little fun on a wedding. Or at my friend's wedding. So didn't get that run done. Those are the only runs I missed in the entire build. I had a couple optional runs that my coach prescribed for me when I traveled. And there's 2 weekends, a weekend in late May where I went on a bachelor trip and a weekend where I saw one of my best friends, Matt, up in Chicago. Those 2 weekends I had optional easy runs, didn't do them, didn't really care. It wasn't about running at that point. It was about seeing my friends and being present with them. And then that same weekend of my best friend's wedding, I had a run I cut short that it was originally going to be 7 miles and I did 4. And then December 26th, I had 9 miles easy that day. I split it up because mentally I was not as strong as I needed to be. And I split up 9 miles easy into 2 runs on the treadmill. One early morning and then one at during my lunch break at work. Right. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. So out of about 240 runs, whether expected or unexpected or just optional days, I didn't do 10 runs. We'll do some more back of the envelope math. 90% would have been 24, 12. So yeah, so I'm like getting 95% compliance with a plan. And honestly, you could get a little bit more granular and say I was closer to like 97, 98 if you didn't count in the optional runs that my coach threw in there. Right. So like 95+% compliance on a plan for 10 months. That's consistent. And I'm not saying that to like, well, maybe I am, but I guess I'm not trying to come at this at the approach of like, look how cool I am or look how good I am. More so, it's just like, that's just kind of what it takes to try to do something great. And, as I've already stated, and many of you, I've been very vocal about this, but my goal is sub 250. And I was literally almost 10 minutes short of that goal. And so it's kind of a tough pill to swallow there. When I'll sit back and say, and like, I feel like I did everything for that build correctly. Like, I don't think there really would have been anything I changed other than I wish I didn't have to move that big 13 mile or 12 miles at marathon pace, that last big workout. Just not a great weekend with the work stress. And like that weekend, that was probably the most work related hours and stress I had been under in the new job since I took it in that past February. And that kind of unfortunately coincided with me having the biggest workout of the entire marathon build on that Saturday, which ultimately became Sunday just because I had to work on Saturday. So yeah, not a whole lot I changed about the build, but that's just the power of consistency. Another lesson learned kind of in the build was changing my perspective on coaching and my willingness to pay for coaching and in my own personal development. I'm not going to share a specific number because I don't know what my current coach or what my coach's current rate is. If you're interested in coaching, man, Adam's been an incredible resource to me. You can find him, I think, at cunninghamrunning.com, and you can learn a little bit more about him and Cunningham Running and all that. But at the time, it seemed like a really big commitment to me to pay that basically monthly for somebody to, obviously program my runs, but just like, it's like, man, you're really going to spend that much on running each month just to get coaching? And I was really hesitant, and it took me a little while to kind of get over the hurdle. It was like, when I was, 10 years from now, would have regretted not getting coaching, or like, would I have regretted just doing this on my own? It's like, it's kind of like that thing of like, which one of those things would I regret more? Kind of doing it on my own or regret hiring a coach? And like, also it's like, it's a little bit more commitment to yourself as well, working with a coach. But ultimately decided, kind of took the leap of faith, started working with them. And man, it's 1000% been worth it for me to have a coach. And what's so impressive about Adam is not just like the program he's done, or just the running specific, but it's like, man, every step of the way, when I've set out some crazy stupid goals, both like some that I've shared publicly and others that probably won't share publicly for a little while, but just big picture goals I have with running. I dream big. I have some crazy stupid fast times in mind for the next couple of years, and pretty much every step of the way, like, Adam's believed in me. He's like, he said, obviously, it's all about how you adapt your training that you're doing, but he's always believed in me. It's like with some of these times where things got a little difficult, Adam's always encouraged me. He's provided context, right? Like in a lot of the situations he's been in prior, and just, man, not just the program itself, but it's almost in a way kind of like a mentor with the running side of things. So it's absolutely been worth it. And it's also changed my mind on me paying for coaching in other areas of life, and just being more willing and able to invest in myself. And, whether it's like a course or just honestly, whatever it might be. Honestly, I probably invest, like, I don't want to say too much, but I used to be really hesitant to spend money on kind of that personal development side of things. Now I probably spend way too much money, but yeah, no, this past year has really changed my mind on coaching, and it started with taking a leap of faith, working with Adam, and from there it's really kind of snowballed into something where I kind of seek out coaching in different areas of life, and will continue to do so. Next lesson learned: you have to be willing to adapt. I think back to like late November, early December of the build, where we're kind of in the thick of marathon training. A lot, these Tuesday midweek workouts are getting longer, 11, 12 miles, a lot of threshold, a lot of tempo work, not a lot of fun workouts. It's more of the I guess unsexy part of marathon training is these tough threshold workouts, right? And now you're starting to incorporate some of those bigger marathon pace workouts, 3x3 mile, 10-mile progressions into the long run. And it took its toll on me. And I had to adapt and really start to prioritize my sleep even more. And honestly, I had to cut some things loose, specifically like the YouTube channel. After, I think it was like the week before the Dallas Marathon, I think was like the last video I put out, or maybe it was 2 weeks prior to that running the BMW Dallas half. And I'm pretty content with that decision. And I think ultimately, like, long-term, YouTube in my current season of life, YouTube probably isn't something I'm going to continue moving forward. But, I had too much like stress on the body, physically, mentally, with work, increasing I got additional responsibilities at work, and running intensity and volume had picked up a little bit. And I just had to cut some stress out of my life, and start to prioritize recovery a lot more. The body handles stress, like they just view stress as all the same. At least that's from my understanding. And it doesn't matter if it's physical stress from running or strength training, or work related stress or life related stress. Like, it's all stress, and it's all, if you overload the body too much with stress, like, it's just gonna have a hard time responding. That's kind of what happened. I was still nailing my workouts, but I felt really low energy some of those days, and was having a little bit difficult time sleeping. And so I had to really prioritize my sleep more, and cut some things out. I didn't really prioritize the podcast much in December, and had to let some things go, but that's just part of it. And I think, moving forward, this next marathon build, whenever that build comes, I'll be more prepared, and I'll have to, up my game and be better with my sleep, and prioritize my sleep even more. And while, not cutting out some of the other areas of life that are important to me. But those are some of my lessons learned in the build itself. But let's get into the race and the race weekend. Before we get into like the true race recap, I just got to shout out a couple of people. First, my parents coming down from Fort Worth to Houston for the weekend of the race, and coming to cheer me on. I'll get into it a little bit more as the race unfolds, but they were instrumental in me making it through that race. And it means so much to me. They've always been my biggest cheerleaders, my biggest supporters, and they continuously impress me with just how much they're willing to invest in my life and be there to support and cheer me on along the way. Second, one of my best friends, Hunter Geezer, who's been on the podcast, he also came down from Fort Worth. And, obviously my parents, I say obviously, I'm very grateful for my parents for coming down, but I kind of expected that. But, having Hunter come down and, you become an adult and you just realize like how much sacrifice people make when they do something like this, where they come down for an entire weekend. Well, I say the entire weekend. He came down on a Saturday, but that takes up most of your weekend, right? You coming down, you're driving down Saturday afternoon, you're staying Saturday night. You have to obviously the race of the morning of, but then you have to drive back as well. And it's a big commitment. And Hunter and his wife came down, and man, that meant so much to me. It's hard to really, truly describe really how much that means to me. Just like I said, him taking, basically just taking away a weekend to come support me just means a ton. I don't know if they'll want to be named on the podcast, but some of my extended family that lives down in Houston that I hadn't seen in a while, they also were on the course and helped my parents kind of navigate around the course for the best places to see me. So major kudos to them. I also got to shout out Matt McWayne. He wasn't able to make it. Who's also been on the podcast. He wasn't able to make it down to Houston, but wanted to still support me. So he got me some of my gels I use, some of the Carb Fuels gels. So major shout out to Matt there. And then, yeah, some kudos, man. So many people crushed it at Houston and over in Austin, the half. Man, just so many of my running friends just absolutely crushed it that weekend. And I had to give two special shout outs. One, Sean Townsend. I'm hoping to have Sean on the podcast soon here. But, I met him earlier in 2024 in the summer. And, I met him. He's like, hey, I'm trying to run sub 250 at Houston. And that guy just went out and executed like a pro and ran sub 250 at Houston. And again, I don't want to tell his story too much because I think I'm going to try to get him on the podcast at some point. But man, just executed like a pro. And then Jim McCabe. Jim's been on the podcast as well. And, he even said it, when he was talking about how he feels like he's kind of really plateaued in sub 250, really seems like a long distance goal for him. And that was a couple months ago. And he comes out in Houston and just freaking crushes sub 250. Major kudos both those dudes. And then I also want to give a shout out to like basically everyone in the running community that was so supportive. So many like good luck texts, so many congratulation texts, comments on Strava, kudos on Strava afterwards. Probably too many people to shout out here, but incredibly grateful for all the support. And in a lot of ways, like it's just so cool to see like people that I've only interacted with a couple times. They're still so supportive and like, congrats, awesome job. It's just really a special place. And it's just encouraging to see so many people in kind of the communities I'm a part of that are just so positive and encouraging like that. It means a ton to me. And I'm sure, I don't want to speak for others, but I'm sure it does mean a ton to others when you get that kind of support. So major kudos to the running community, to the runners that flew past me when I was run walking the last 5-ish miles, maybe even more, encouraging me and telling me I got this. Thank you guys. You guys rock. Last kudos was the Endorphins Cheer Squad at mile 25. I'll also kind of touch on how they helped me get through the race. But they had a little cheer squad there. And I think it's, as I kind of alluded to earlier, I think it's so special that like some of those people that they weren't even racing the race that drove down from Dallas and came to cheer on some of their runners in their community, the Endorphins Dallas group. Man, it's really cool to see. And it's kind of, it stands out to me. And I think it's really impressive. But all right, that's enough kudos to go around. Let's get into the actual race itself. So morning of, get up at 4 a.m. Got to get some carbs in me. Got to go to the bathroom. So Cliff Energy Chews with some caffeine, a banana, and a fig bar. About 150 grams of carbs. Probably, that's a touch high. Probably 120-ish grams of carbs. Go to the bathroom. Mission successful. Stomach still felt a little full. So I had a shot of espresso to, again, help me go to the bathroom. And again, mission successful. But left my hotel around 5:20-ish a.m., give or take a few minutes. It was about 3/4 of a mile walk to the convention center, maybe a smidge less than that. But man, you walk out of the hotel, you take a left out of the hotel, and there is a immediate headwind. It was crisp. It was cold walking over there, but yeah, dropped off my gear at like 5:45. Man, the convention center was just so well run. it was very easy to get over there, very easy to get in. Gear check, dropping that off was super easy and convenient. They had plenty of porta potties actually in the convention center. It was just super easy. And then I made my way over to a hotel just right across the street, meeting up with Sean and Jim. And then a group from Pegasus over in Dallas also had a big group going kind of sub 250 as well. So we all met at a hotel, met up beforehand, and we were going to try to, Jim, Sean, and I were going to try to stick with that 250 group. We get over to A Corral. We got in with about 8 minutes before it closed. Found our way to a nice little sign that said 6:30 pace. I'm like, that's me. I'll stand right here. Ended up seeing Kafuzi, which is really cool. And elites start, and then we're kind of A Corral on our way. So coming out the first 5K, no real issues. About mile 3.5, I think it was the first time I went through an aid station and took a gel. I really fumbled my way through that first one. I had a hard time getting the gel out of my pocket. It was just kind of a pain in the butt. But, that first 10K, I saw my parents around mile 6. It really felt really comfortable. And I even pulled back a little bit. I was still manually splitting 6:25-ish, 6:27, kind of early in that 10K. I was like, man, this feels a little hot. Going into the race, my coach and I we talked a lot about patience, right? And he told me to be patient. I'm going to say it 3 times for giggles. I don't know. But patience, right? Save something left for 18, 19, 20, come down Memorial, and then get after it. Start, picking people off and starting to make your move. That was the plan. And so, I'm splitting mid 620s. And I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm going to pull back a little bit. So I kind of detached from the group. Miles 7 through 13, these started to feel a little bit more difficult, but still really felt like these were manageable. They weren't really I just kind of kept telling myself look, this too will pass. There's better miles ahead. Just kind of get through this stage and position yourself well for the last second half of the race. I took my caffeine pill at mile 12. Everything was kind of going to plan. I'm still manually splitting high 620. So I'm like, man, I'm still right on pace. We go over that hill right before the halfway point. It's really just an overpass. I probably ran it a little too hard, trying to maintain 6:30 pace. I probably could have backed off a smidge on the effort, but nothing too crazy. I crossed the halfway point. I want to say it was 125 high. So, I was planning on negative splitting. So I think I was kind of right where I needed to be, honestly. But we're mile 14, getting in, towards the end of that mile was the first time where 6:30 pace started to feel a little labored. I ultimately made the decision. I'm like, I don't think 6:30 is sustainable for the entire duration from here on out. So I pulled back a little bit with the intention of, I'm going to play the long game, be patient, get to mile 20 and still have something left in the tank. That was my intentions. What ended up happening was I found myself in no man's land with a headwind, and slowly, maybe I relied too much on feel. Maybe I just had a hard time kind of refocusing, but my pace dropped. I dropped, I think at 17-ish, I split it a 7:07. I was like, oh no, this isn't good. And I think it was around that point that I had my first thoughts of just DNFing, stepping off the course. And that was just kind of scary and lonely place to be with so much race left to run. And I already wanted to throw in the towel. And it wasn't like I went out at 6:30 pace and just ran myself into the ground and then now I'm bonking. It wasn't like that. It's I pulled back intentionally to leave something left in the tank. And I get later in the race and there's nothing left in the tank. And I don't think I was as mentally sharp as I would have liked to have been. And I think that was my first lesson learned during the race was the ability to refocus and reshift when the goal isn't going to be attained. Right. And I think back to when I had Greg Cortez on the podcast and we talked about A, B, and C goals. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense in the context of after the race, different determinants of success after the race. So if you don't hit your A goal, it's not like it's the end of the world. What I experienced was when things got hard unexpectedly at mile 16, 17, even when I had slowed down, I needed something to latch onto mentally. Whether it was, I need to as soon as I realized 250 wasn't going to happen, it's I need to focus on maintaining 640. I need to hold the line and do everything I can to maintain 640. Or I'm going to run sub 255. If I could have transitioned from 250 to 255, I think it would have benefited me. But I just didn't have anything to latch onto physically in that moment. I didn't have the tools in the toolkit, and I didn't have that experience to draw upon. And yeah, it became really tough. It became a really lonely place. I was getting passed by a lot of people, and yeah, I'll just be honest. The thought of just stepping off the course and taking a DNF was very legit. And there's a good possibility, every time I crossed a medical tent or like went past a medical tent, that urge became stronger and stronger. And it got pretty close around 18, 19 of just calling it quits. I think somewhere in there I did walk for the first time. So that was really stupid decision on my part because it made the rest of the race. That's really where it went from like, hey, I could still kind of rally to pull out like a 253, 254 to, once I decided to walk, it was like, yeah, I'm not setting myself up for success. But, I knew my parents were going to be at mile 21. And I thought, man, how disappointing would it be if I just quit? And my parents, who had traveled all this way, spent all this time working with some of my extended family members to plan out where they're going to see me on the course, and they don't see me because I quit. And thought, well, then I thought, oh my gosh, my mom's going to have a panic attack if I never come across at mile 21. So I kept going. And, I've told my dad this, and I'll get into the endorphin cheer squad, but like, I don't, here in a second, but I don't know if I would have finished that race without them and not having the knowledge that they would have been at mile 21. But I get to 21, I see them, I get a little emotional. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is kind of embarrassing. And then I had thoughts. I'm like, hey, do I just like step off the course? I saw my parents, and then I'm like, you know what? The endorphin cheer squad's at 25. Don't want to let those guys down. I know they're not there just to cheer me on, but there's a ton of other runners. But I felt like, man, I don't want to be the guy that just DNFs. So while I walked a good portion of 22, 23, and I think maybe in part of 24. I don't know, guys. I'll be honest. I'll be completely honest. From like mile 17 on, I don't really remember a whole lot. Not a fun place to be at mentally, and I was just focusing on surviving. I remember seeing a couple of medical tents. I remember walking for the first time. I remember the 255 pace group coming roaring up behind me. I'm like, oh my God, there's no way they're already catching me. Trying to stick with them and then quickly getting dropped by them again. And that was pretty humbling. At mile 23, there's this guy that, he had also been walking a little bit. And we had kind of like taken turns passing each other while one of us was walking, the other one ran and passed each other. It's like, hey man, you got this. And eventually, like, we just kept kind of going back and forth. And he looks at me, he's like, we're going to freaking finish this thing. And it gave me enough motivation to kind of snap out of it. And I don't think I walked the rest of the way. So, 24, 25, 26, I just kind of I think I was around 7 flat pace, maybe picked up a smidge, but yeah, saw the endorphins crew at 25. And again, I reached out to Kim and told her, like, I don't know if I finish that race if I don't have the knowledge that they're going to be there cheering me on at 25. That's just where I was at mentally and all that. And, saw them at 25, and then the sub 3 pacing group comes flying right up on me again. Or not, I say again, another pacing group comes up on me. It's the sub 3. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, it just kind of snapped me out of it. It's like, wait a minute, I can still run sub 3. Like, this day has gone kind of horribly wrong for me. And just kind of pulled me out of whatever mental slump I was in. And yeah, I kind of rallied. I picked up the pace. I probably got closer back to almost goal marathon pace and really hoofed it in the last quarter mile and snuck in a 2:59:38. So that was my journey to running sub 3. Took a big swing on 250. Probably my fitness is probably closer to 255. And if I pace that race a little differently and, more conservative at 640s, we're probably looking at a different race result. So probably a little too aggressive on the pacing, but it was one of those things where I can't speak for my coach 100%, but basically, for me personally, I had 100% confident that I was going to run sub 250. Like, there was no doubt in my mind. And, so that's just sometimes how life works. And that was kind of one of my lessons learned here is patience. And I've already talked about it. Patience was the strategy for the race. but it was the right lesson I needed to learn for life in general, and take a step back and realize my fitness and my growth and my fitness is going to come. It's just going to take a little bit longer than I might have thought, right? And I was getting a little ahead of my skis already, thinking about Boston and 2026, and a lot of my friends were going to be running Boston. I started thinking about time goals for Boston, and I was like, kind of got a little ahead of myself, if I'm being honest. And just kind of, I pretty much assumed I was going to run sub 250. I'd have probably given myself enough buffer to make sure I hit that additional Boston cutoff. And it was just one of those things where I just had to learn the lesson of patience, right? And I think kind of concurrently with that is the lesson of, I set these big goals, right? These big time goals for the marathon, and it's not about the goal itself. It's just, you set a big enough goal that, if you're going to get anywhere close to hitting that goal, you have to change the person you are. You have to change your habits, your behaviors. Right. And the person I became on this journey of going sub 250, I'm really proud of that person. Right. There's been so much growth, really prioritizing my sleep, my habits. I can't think of a time in my life where, I had to sacrifice some other areas in sleep later in the build. But man, pretty much from I know I had some travel in May and June, so I wouldn't say with 100% certainty, but from April to August, I was waking up every Monday morning through Saturday morning at 4:30, and really took a lot of pride in being the guy that gets up at 0 dark 30 and 4:30, and man, that consistency was unreal. I don't, in terms of not just waking up, obviously you can't snooze the alarm, but also just the discipline and the consistency with 7:45. All right, I got to turn my 7:45 p.m. I got to turn my electronics off so I can get to bed at a reasonable hour. I was incredibly disciplined with that. And again, some things kind of slipped a little bit as I got deeper in the marathon build, but man, there was a stretch there where I was incredibly disciplined. And I don't think I've had that level of discipline in my life up to this point. And that was really cool. Also, I feel like I've become a lot more social and put myself out there more. I've been, crossed paths with more people in the running communities. I've, gone to more different run clubs, met different people. And, I think back to Logan of 2023, when I just kind of got started with running, and it took me I joined a run club. I joined Plano Running Club Facebook group, and it took me 3 to 4 months. I want to say it may have been a bit longer, honestly. I can't even remember the specifics, but I was on that Facebook page looking at them doing their runs and was super hesitant to go run with others for whatever reason. And I just kind of I'm just going to do my own thing. And now it's I really want to run with people and be more social, and kind of the camaraderie of it. It's something I really value and want to continue. So one other thing I wanted to touch on, and this is something that I've kind of always struggled with. I have a background in athletics, playing football from 5th grade through high school, and then playing in college football, or playing football in college as well, is, when I have a bad performance, or, when we don't hit our goal as a team, I'd get really disappointed and kind of wear that loss, kind of wear it on my sleeve for a while, and really be down on myself when I had a bad performance. And, I think that it comes from a healthy fear of letting my teammates down and not being the one that's responsible for our team not hitting our goals. But I say that to say is I think back to my first marathon, right? The original goal was sub 3:30. And this is kind of an embarrassing story to share, but I hope somebody relates to it. I don't know. We'll see. But I had a goal of going sub 3:30 for my first marathon. And as training progressed and as I adapted to training, I got close to the marathon, and I thought, you know what? I'm really in shape to go closer to 3:17. And I was on pace to go sub 3:17 for the most part through mile 22, 23. And then I truly bonked physically and put my body through the ringer, and I just could not hold on to that pace physically any longer. And walked that last 5K. I had about 6 or 7 minutes to my marathon time and went 3:24. I had already talked to my parents beforehand, and whether it was me just being lazy or me just, not having the knowledge I know now, I was like, you know what, guys, thank you so much for coming, but y'all don't even worry about trying to find me after the race. let's go back to y'all's side of town, and we'll kind of reconvene later. And so I finished my first marathon. I get to the finishing area, like I'm trying to find some friends, not having much luck. And, I talked about, I really put my body through the ringer, and I started like compulsively like shivering, like it's sunny. It had heated up, but my body was like shivering really bad. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to the hotel, and shower and just kind of try to warm up a little bit. And I take a shower, and I now have a hoodie and sweatpants on. I'm like burritoed myself up in the hotel comforter. And this is embarrassing to share, but I got really emotional and like really, I started crying, and I was like, in that moment, like I'd just done something incredible. I just run a marathon. I smashed my original goal I was going after. And in that moment, there's so many things to be happy for, grateful for, and for me to have been proud of myself. But in that moment, I was disappointed, and I felt a little isolated, and I cried quite a bit while still shivering. And it was just something like, I've always had the thought of like, it's okay to be emotional, like when you have a tough setback or have a performance that you don't think is up to your standard, because it means you care. And I still believe that, but at the same time, I kind of walked away from that experience. I was totally fine. Like within 2 or 3 hours, I was feeling better, and like wasn't something that lingered for very long. But I kind of walked away from that feeling of like, or walked away from that experience of like, do I really want to be the guy that can't be happy, like that has so much going on, so many good things going on in his life, but yet like holds on so tightly to these results that it defines kind of how he views himself. And that's just something that like really stuck with me, and I wasn't super intentional about it going in. I was very to the Houston build, fast forward, I guess 13 months. But now at this point, I had a goal of sub 250, and I was very focused and dialed in that goal. But just an area of growth, and this kind of feels weird of like me sharing this, because I don't know, it kind of feels like I'm just bragging about myself. But I was really, really proud of myself for the way I handled this. Not hitting my goal this time around with sub 250, and really missing by a wide margin. When I crossed the finish line, I got back, got my gear check bag, and had my phone for the first time after the race. I shot a text to my coach. I was like, "Hey man, sorry, I kind of blew up." And I was a little emotional crossing the finish line. Also, just like I didn't really feel good physically or mentally. But I got my phone. I texted him, and I kind of felt like I let him down. Like he's a very reputable coach, and I want to reflect. He programmed and trained. He put me in a position to succeed, and I felt like I kind of let him down, which maybe it goes back to that team aspect of like, I kind of view my coach and I kind of like a team, and how we're, going after these big goals and working together and all that. And, I know he's a reputable coach, and like he wants his athletes to succeed. And I really wanted to showcase his abilities as a coach through my performance, and it didn't really materialize. Again, I don't think that really has anything to say about him or myself. I still think very highly of Adam, but yeah, I kind of felt like I let him down. I sent him a text, and of course, Adam, the great coach he is just like, dude, there's nothing to be sorry about. You took a big swing, and you went for it. And there's a lot to say about that. And just, he was so positive and encouraging. But I was kind of sad and disappointed in myself in that moment. But then afterwards, I quickly saw Hunter, saw Sean and Jim, and I got back to my hotel after it was all kind of the dust settles. I'm back in my hotel room, and I'm like, I can have this realization. I guess, I don't know if I had the flashback to the BMW marathon the year before. If I can't be content with my parents coming down to cheer me on, with one of my best friends and his wife coming down to cheer me on, I got to see so many friends crush their goals, and I got so much support from the running community. And I'm like, if I can't be content now, like, and I can't be happy now in this moment, when will I be? And I just kind of had this realization, and I just kind of after that, I just kind of felt at ease. I'm like, I kind of just let go of the results, and I just had this feeling of content. And I'm really happy that I didn't let that spiral into negative thoughts or letting a time in a race dictate how I feel about myself. So that was a major dub. Yeah, and I think other kind of things I learned in the race, and I'll try to wrap it up here, but I've already kind of touched on this, but within the race itself, moving forward, whenever, I think it's super important to, like, if I say I'm going to run 250 and hold on to that goal for as long as I can. But if I know that's not going to happen, I just need something else to grasp onto mentally to refocus and re-engage the mind to be able to still hold on. And because things will get tough regardless if you hit your goal or not. But when pardon my French, but when crap hits the fan, I needed a resource to be able to shift the mind to whether, again, like I said, whether it's to run 640s or run, 255, sub 255, something to fixate and really hold the line and hold on to was something that I'm gonna have to, continue mentally find ways to hold the line and push myself physically and mentally when things aren't going to plan. One other small thing, and then again, I'll try to wrap this up here, but is when things get hard, it's easy to focus on others, and it's just like a quick little hack. And I kind of learned this in college. I don't know if it was formally or if I came to a realization or my coaches kind of led me to this conclusion, which is probably the coaches. But we would have, going back to college, we would have these 6 a.m. off-season conditioning workouts. And to provide a little context, our college didn't really have classes on that Thursday, and these workouts were always on a Thursday morning at 6 a.m. We didn't really have with classes on Thursday, so it was very well known that a lot of students at the college would go out Wednesday night and sleep in Thursday morning. And of course, for us in our group, it was 6 a.m. Thursday morning, and it wasn't like we were like playing patty cake and eating buns or whatever. I don't even buns a thing. I don't know. Anywho, this is a cue for me to wrap it up, but it's not like these were hard workouts. And I just kind of came to this realization of, like, if I'm a leader and I feel like I'm pushing myself harder than other people on the team, or I'm going above and beyond to put myself in a position to succeed, and I'm really struggling to get through a workout, right? Like and this is in a very probably narcissistic, selfish way, but well, maybe not selfish, but it was like, if I'm struggling, then some of my teammates are really going to be struggling. And I kind of just like stumbled my way into this conclusion of, like, when things get hard, I focus on others and like try to encourage others. And so any of my PRC friends that are listening that come to Track Tuesdays, right? I'm usually like pretty quiet and like not super vocal or anything. But then if anybody's randomly just heard me say like, "Hey, you're doing great," or like, "Good job," whoever it might be, that's probably because I'm in the middle of the pain cave. And I'm trying to take the focus off myself to try to get through that workout. But I utilized that in the race, and that was just a good reminder, because I wasn't the only one run walking in that last 4 or 5 miles of the race. And I try my best, when I pass somebody, to say, hey, I believe in you. You got this. Come on, let's go. And it kind of worked, but also I would walk thereafter. So it kind of worked, but something else I just at least wanted to share. But, well, I've been rambling for a little while here. What's next for me? Well, I think I'm going to get back into kind of this base training phase of a lot of like shorter distance stuff with the training. So 5K, 10K specific training. Might jump in some races, might pace some races. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, just kind of sharpen the axe, continue to push myself physically and really see what I'm capable of. And like I said, sharpen the axe. And when the time comes for me to jump back in the marathon distance, I'll be ready. I'll be fit, and I'll be ready to tackle really just another stupid fast goal, and we'll get after it. All right, that's all I got. Thank you guys so much for your time, attention, and energy. Those are, I'm coming to learn that your time and your energy are probably the most valuable resources we have in the grand scheme of things. And the fact that somebody is listening to this podcast means so much to me. And I know how much of a commitment that is, but thank you so much for listening. And that's all I got. For my YouTube folks, thank you guys so much for coming along for the journey of Sub 250 didn't hit my goal, but again, I'm just so proud of the person I've become throughout these last 10-ish months, 10, 11 months. But like I said, kind of alluded to earlier, I'm probably not going to continue in this season of life to continue to put out YouTube content. If you want to follow me, I'll have my Strava in the description. I'll have my Instagram, and I'll have the link for the podcast, and I should have my email in there. So if you want to stay in touch, feel free to reach out. And what I've already kind of alluded to, your time, attention, and energy means so much to me, and I truly believe it is the most finite resource we have. It's the most valuable one we have. So thank you so much for that. All right, so I guess I'll sign off one last time here. Let's attack the day, do the work. Catch you guys later.
Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Logan Hawley podcast. Your time and attention means a great deal to me. If you could please subscribe, leave a review, and rate the podcast, it'd be greatly appreciated. Quick little disclaimer here. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered health, financial, or professional advice. This podcast is not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.